Well, hello and welcome to Rajat TV. You're watching India Fights Back with me, Rajat Kain. In this episode of the show, we'll take up the findings of the study conducted by the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, or the CSIR. Well, as per the study, which is now in public domain, it can be concluded that possibly the worst is behind us. However, we need to still strictly follow COVID appropriate behavior. Well, with a cautious optimism about our fight against the pandemic, entering the stage of mass immunization, the government has now rolled out new unlocking guidelines. Now, as per the order, all activities have been permitted outside the containment zone. Remember, there are still certain areas which are containment zone. There are certain areas where it happens to be a strict vigil in terms of numbers that's coming up of the COVID positive patients. Well, there are certain exceptions. However, every activities outside the containment zone will be subject to strict adherence to standard operating procedures, or the SOP. Well, without taking any time further, we have a panel of three important guests, and let's discuss further on these issues. Shantanu Gupta, he is Senior Principal Scientist, IGBI. Dr. Anant Mohan, Professor and Head of Department Pulmonary Sciences from AIIMS, and Urvashi Prasad, Public Policy Specialist from NITI Aayog. Well, many thanks for joining us. Let me start with you, Shantanu Sengupta. You are the co-authors of this report or the study conducted by CSIR. Sir, for the benefit of our viewers, could you elaborate further what are the broad findings of this particular study conducted by CSIR? Sir, Shantanu.
Thank you for inviting me here.
Pleasure,
We
sir.
had conducted this study in the mainly in the month of August and September. So
Okay.
there are a few highlights of the study. One is in the month of August, September, the average seropositivity in India was about 10.1%, but it was around 30% in September in Delhi and Hyderabad and a few other places, while
Yes.
it was less than 5% in several districts of the country. That makes it an average of 10.1. What was interesting is that when we did the analysis, we found that wherever the seropositivity had increased by to more than 10%, in subsequent 15 days or 1 month, there was a decrease in the number of COVID cases
Okay.
that
Okay.
you get from COVID-19.org. While wherever the seropositivity was less than 10%, the cases increased. So
Okay.
in future, this may be a very interesting handle to understand that using a serosurveillance study, we can predict which are the areas that will see an increase in the cases and which will see a decrease in the cases in near future. That's one important thing that had come out. The second thing that was coming out is almost 75 to 80% of the people that we analyzed or found seropositive, they were completely asymptomatic,
Okay.
which
Okay.
has two implications. One is there has been a lot of controversy on whether asymptomatic people generate antibodies or not. So we see that a lot of asymptomatic individuals do generate antibody. And the
Right.
second interpretation is also that although the number of cases, so people who are asymptomatic never did a test, generally don't do a test. So we have not accounted for these people who have already been affected by the virus but not have any symptoms. The third major finding that we had was the stability of the antibody. So, since this study is a longitudinal cohort study, we are monitoring the same individuals at different time points. And
Okay.
what we found was both the antibody against N protein as well as your neutralizing antibody. We used a kit which is a surrogate for neutralizing antibody, which targets the RBD of S protein. That is also stable, at least that is in detectable range even after 6 months. Although there is an initial decline, but the levels even after 6 months are well above the threshold. Uh, the fourth interesting point was we found we had categorized individual on the basis of their exposure status as well as their lifestyle habits. And what we had found was people who had used public transport or
Mm-hmm.
people whom we referred to as outsourced staff, which means that people who are involved in security or housekeeping, so they are basically high exposed people. The seropositivity among them was more than 15%. So it was a
Okay.
almost a double than the other people that we had tested.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, we also found among lifestyle factors a vegetarian diet or smoking had low seroprevalence. Now,
Right.
I'd like to qualify here that we have never said smoking is good, and we believe that smoking should not be encouraged in public, but this is an association study where we
Mm.
have seen that these people have low seropositivity, which could
Okay.
mean that the disease was less, or it could mean that they had developed antibodies which vanished very fast, or they did not develop antibodies at all. Similar is case for blood group O. Blood group O has been shown to be protective in lots of population over the world, and we have also found the same thing. So these are the few highlights of our study.
That's really important to understand the highlights, or to say the broad points of this series survey. Many thanks, Shantanu. Sengupta will come back to you and further discuss about this study by CSIR. Well, let me go off to Dr. Anant Mohan. So, going by the sheer numbers and statistics, we have seen a massive recovery, and of course, like the number of positivity has come, I mean, the positive cases has come down considerably in last 1 month. Is it safe to say that, okay, fine, the tide is, it's coming down, or we need to be extremely cautious about coming to any conclusion at this stage? Dr. Mohan.
Yeah, well, uh, I think, like already has been said, the facts are there, and the number of positive cases is on the decline across the country, barring one or two states by and large. So, no doubt about that. And hence, we have to be a little positive and we have to be optimistic, but again, it has to be a careful and cautious optimism. And hence, we cannot let our guard down at this stage because, see, at many countries across the world, have seen a second surge, they have seen a third surge, and we should not forget that the second or the third surge in most of those countries was by far worse. Mostly, it was worse than the previous one. So we should not let ourselves get into that situation. That is the first thing. Number of cases is going down. That's extremely good, and that is why the graded deal unlocking of the system is also going on, which is also
Right.
essential. At the same time, the basic precautions that always we have been talking about for the last 1 year, probably they should not be tampered with, and that they should continue in spite of all the unlocking. Because if at this stage we let our guard down and something happens, then you know how exponentially cases can rise. And if something like that happens again, then it is quite possible again we'll be facing the same situation, or maybe even a worse situation than we have seen before. So at this point of time, when we are in a better situation, we must make sure that we are in a better situation, and we should make all efforts to stay that way.
Right, Dr. Anant Mohan. That's really important that we have to take all the precautions possible. Of course, we cannot let our guard down. There is a positivity, but we need to be extremely cautious about how we move ahead with this latest development. Well, Urvashi Prasad, thanks for joining us. Now, here we are. Like just yesterday, there were new unlocking guidelines or the rules to say off by the government. How important do you think it is to go for the graded unlock? We have seen nearly 10 months of, the lockdown was imposed in March last year, and now we are at the end of January. There have been extreme gains made by the lockdown. Now, how important do you think it's to unlock and return back to normalcy?
Yes, so the approach, as we've seen, we started off with a nationwide lockdown, and the central government was really having most of the say at that time in that initial phase. But progressively after that, you've seen that the power of decision making regarding the lockdown and various other aspects of pandemic management have actually been decentralized progressively to states and then even to sub-state levels, where we've said, even based on how your district is doing, you can take a call, whether you want to do some sort of a micro lockdown or you want to have a containment zone, etc. So I think that has been the approach of the government throughout, because obviously we've tried to balance the health imperative with the livelihoods, with the with the economy. So we have tried to consistently restart, as many sectors of the economy as we can, but while ensuring that we don't fritter away the health gains, because then, it will undo all the good work, that has happened. So yes, it's that twin balance that we are continuing to go ahead with. The latest guidelines, as you said, they do allow most of the activities, but it's in a calibrated fashion. So, if you're running a cinema hall, then you have to be cognizant of, the occupancy level that is allowed. And it's not that you can have 100% occupancy. So those are the kinds of things that it's very important that, the different sectors which are opening up remain conscious of, so that, we don't lose all the good work and all the health gains that we've got. But yes, we definitely do need to open up whatever sectors we can, so that the economic, slowdown which had come about can then start to, pick up again. So I think it's really that fine balance which the government is trying to, maintain at this time. And that is why, the central government is now just putting out broad guidelines, but it's very much up to states and districts to adapt them in a manner which is most suitable to their local context.
Right. That's important. As you said, the decision making in terms of lockdowns or to say local lockdowns has been completely decentralized, and it's up to state governments how to go about the unlocking. Of course, there have been advisories or to say guidelines in particular about the containment zones as well. Well, Dr. Shantanu Sengupta, I mean, does the high population or high density population area still happens to be the area of interest here, I would say? Is it so?
Yeah, so initially when we looked at, if you see all the places where we had got higher seropositivity were mostly in high dense area. Right. So we had divided the country in three, density-wise into three groups. One is low density, which has less than 1,000 people per square kilometer, then 1,000 to 10,000 and greater than 10,000. So we very clearly saw that wherever it was greater than 10,000, the seropositivity was high, which means again that those places you have probably now have larger amount of seropositivity than we have got. So it might be very important to concentrate on low dense and semi-low dense areas at this moment.
Well, density area or high density area continues to be the area of interest, or where there is a series of tests being done. Dr. Anant Mohan, we were just discussing in your last reply that we still need to be we were extremely circumspect. We cannot let our guard down, and there is, as it happened in other countries, there is always a threat of second wave with virus. Now, when we talk about that, is it the virus in general, or is it due to the mutants we have seen, especially in UK, in South Africa, and especially like there have been cases in India, but not that much if we talk of the UK mutant or new mutant to say of?
Yeah, well, so it may be either way, or it may be both also, because right now, again, we know that there have been a couple of mutations in other countries, and some of them were detected in India also because of the travel. Now, how it pans out in the future, one doesn't know. It may be the same virus again, which may, because now you see the travel has also opened up, and whether we get it inherently from within India, or again we get that same surge from somewhere overseas, we don't know. And if we get it overseas, it may be the same strain, or it may be any other strain, a mutant strain also. That only one can know when that situation arises. But as of now, I think the reinfections, if at all, or a relapse or whatever, if it happens in future, may be from the same strain or maybe from a different strain as well. A lot will also depend upon, like we were talking about, the degree of herd immunity that will have occurred in India at this point of time, and also the degree of protection which will have been offered to the Indians by vaccination, in the next couple of months. Because see, right now we don't also know whether the vaccines which we are getting right now, they will be effective against which particular strains. They may be effective against most other strains, they may not be effective. So one doesn't know that in particular. Hence, a lot of factors will decide the susceptibility of a population to reinfections and resurgence. In America, for example, they are facing a huge relapse in the last couple of months. But probably if they get vaccinated in now in the next couple of months, probably and hopefully that will not happen. Similarly, if a majority of our population gets vaccinated in the next couple of months, then hopefully a second surge of vaccine should not happen, should not occur, at least with the same strain. A lot will depend upon the degree of protectivity and efficacy of the vaccines that we get, and how long the vaccine protectivity and how long that protection lasts after vaccination. That also is important. So these are all questions that we don't have the exact answers to all of them, but these are the scientific surmise that we can make as of now.
That's really important. Let me have a supplementary question. As you mentioned that there is still studies going on in terms of the efficacy or the effect of vaccines lasting on the recipient. Well, is there? I mean, there is also survey, or I beg your pardon. There's also study being conducted on how effective are these vaccines on the new mutant as well. So, how big a threat do you see if we talk of the new mutant, particularly in India and the kind of gigantic scale of population we have?
See, first of all, mutations are nothing new as far as viruses are concerned. If there is a virus, it is bound to mutate at some or the other time. And we know that even this coronavirus has already undergone several mutations in the last couple of months since it has been circulating. In fact, if we go almost, a virus mutates almost once or twice every month also. So that doesn't mean that every mutation is harmful or it is more harmful. Most of the mutations actually may be very mild mutation. They may not lead to any specific changes in the say danger as portrayed by that particular virus. It was only this UK mutant virus that they said is maybe not more dangerous in terms of mortality, but it is more transmissible, more likely to be transmitted to others. So infectivity rate may become higher. Hence, every mutation is not necessarily more dangerous. That is first of all to recognize. And if it is, then one will have to find a way to counter that. So that is where we are at this point of time.
Right. But Urushi, you just mentioned that now it's up to the local district and the municipal authorities that how they enforce these unlocking guidelines. Do you see still there are some areas where maximum precaution is required, and certain states, as we've been discussing, or the high density population happens to be the area where the interest of authorities lie? Urushi.
Yeah, so I think at the state level, firstly, we have two states currently, Kerala and Maharashtra, which are making up almost 50% of the active cases. It was at least 45% when I last checked. So, of course, these two states, there's still relatively a higher sort of percentage of active cases. So, at a broadly state level, of course, these are two states where we still, have some distance to go. In terms of reducing our percentage of active cases. But the other, from the start, our goal has been to minimize fatalities. And I think there as well, we have some work to do if we look at a state like Punjab, for instance, where the absolute number of cases might not be so high, but their fatality rates are in excess of 3% at this point. So there's still some work to be done. Both in terms of reducing the active cases as well as bringing the fatality rates as low as possible. We have sort of set ourselves a goal that we should try and bring it down to less than 1%, the overall, fatality rates. And at the India level, we've done fairly well. We've come down to about 1.44%. But as I said, at a state level, at a disaggregated level, there is still work to be done on both these fronts. So I think that is something we will continue to take up. And the other part is that, yes, in the more dense areas, you would have had, some amount of this, of course, the seropositivity building up, the herd immunity building up. You have large pools of recovered people also, offering protection to others. But there are certain parts of the country which will, of course, continue to therefore remain more vulnerable, where you haven't had this kind of, level of herd immunity build up yet. So it is important. While we have seen that the pandemic has largely been an urban phenomenon, not just in India
Okay.
but across the
Okay.
world, and the more dense areas have been more vulnerable, the more densely populated areas. But that's not to say that other parts of the country can let their guard down, because it's still an unpredictable virus. And very quickly, some new strain comes, some new mutation happens, and then we don't know how it will pan out. We can't predict everything about how it will behave, really. So I think that caution needs to be maintained across the board. Whether we are feeling that we are reaching herd immunity levels or not, we need to continue to follow those COVID safe behaviors, because vaccine alone will not be the holy grail. And I think that's something experts have
Yes.
repeated several times, that just because the vaccine has come, let's not feel that, okay, this is our magic bullet solution. It's a very important part of the solution, but it's not the only one. So we'll have to continue to follow our other behaviors. And we'll have to, of course, from the policy side, the government side, ensure that we can still check the spread wherever it is there, wherever we have a relatively high percentage of cases. And as I said, also minimize the fatality or bring it down as low as possible. So I think those still very much remain goals for us.
Well, absolutely. And Urvashi, that's extremely important. And that's what all the experts are saying. Listen to all the experts. This is our request to our viewers. Do not listen to hearsay, listen to experts. Keep following COVID appropriate behavior. Well, vaccination cannot be an absolute shield against the virus as yet. Well, as we go towards the close of the show, Mr. Shantanu Sengupta, I know, I mean, the study has been, or rather, observations of the study has been largely reassuring. But are there any caveat areas that you'd like to flag and we need to be extremely vigilant about if those indications have been thrown by this study? Sir.
So as we have shown and as you have been discussing in this show as well, we are optimistic that that probably the worst is over. But as Dr. Anant Mohan has mentioned, that there has been second round, third round peaks
Yes.
in several countries. We hope that that's not going to be the case in India. It's our sincere hope that it should not happen. And we are undertaking the current status. We are looking at the seroprevalence again at this time. And what we find is the seropositivity has increased a lot, which is a good sign. Having said that, I would again strongly recommend that everybody, whenever you're going out, should wear a mask, because that's an important protection. Even if you're vaccinated, please do not think that you're protected. It doesn't make any harm. It doesn't do any harm if we take precautions, right? So although we are probably hoping that things are over, but we should be very careful, because
Right.
there may be other strains coming up, and even this strain there may be other populations getting affected. So we should be very careful. Yeah.
Well, on that note, we sign off. Many thanks, Dr. Shantanu Sengupta, Dr. Anant Mohan from AIIMS, and Urvashi Prasad from NITI Aayog. Many thanks for joining us and elucidating on the CSIR study, as well as the new unlocking guidelines issued by the government. At the same time, also emphasizing that even though worst could be behind us, but we still cannot let our guard down. And that is what our request to our viewers as well. Well, there is a small appeal by RSTV before we sign off. Here is it. Well, keep wearing a mask. Keep washing your hands, 20 seconds at least. That's what the expert says. And do not forget to follow physical distancing. Well, that's it in this edition of IFB. Keep watching RSTV and stay safe. Goodbye.